Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for today's crew training. So here's our short agenda for today. Matt Bennett's going to be doing our presentation on wellness. We're going to do a breakout room discussion on the takeaways for the training, a little bit of report back. We're doing another giveaway today. So for the folks that stay till the end, we'll be putting your names up on the screen for a giveaway. We're going to close out with our poll. And then also, just as a heads up, we would like to take a group photo today to highlight you all in our newsletter that goes out to all of our members. So, if you need to get camera ready, we'll be doing that at the end. So just as a heads up on that, we will be asking folks to turn their cameras on. All right, without further interruption, I'm going to hand it over to Matt for a presentation today. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you all today. I'll get my screen up here real quick. Awesome. There we go. Hopefully that looks good. If not, just shout at me. So I am thrilled to be back with my friends at CCALAC. It's such an acronym. I get a smile every time I say it, though I have to admit I do have to practice it a little bit to get it right. So I'm coming to you from Denver, Colorado today. And I was thinking I've done so much work in LA County pre-pandemic that you miss LA when you're even sort of missing LAX. Not my favorite airport, just so you know. I'd go to Burbank first, Ontario second. I don't think there's direct flights, or there wasn't, to Long Beach. I haven't been to that one, but I just want to make sure you know I would check the other two first. But when you find yourself missing LAX, that's when you know you miss your LA County friends. So it's great to be with you virtually. Just take a look at a palm tree for me. If you're anywhere by the ocean, I just miss the Pacific so much. Haven't seen it in years. But so I'm excited to spend a little bit of time with you today, really talking about the unprecedented challenge for us as leaders right now. For the individuals that are supporting providers who are delivering just amazing care and have done throughout this pandemic and all the other challenges that we've hit as well. So just a little bit about me. If this is your first time in one of my trainings, I don't talk a lot about those initials behind my name. The joke historically has been it just represents my student loan debt, though I'm one of those people that applied for forgiveness, so I might lose that joke, which I'd be happy to. But I started my career out, the MA as a degree in counseling psychology, and started my career out as a therapist. And around about 20 years ago now, in 2002, I came across the Adverse Childhood Experience study, and really got me thinking about trauma, the impact of trauma and stress on neurobiology, mental health. Just really opened my eyes, and as I say, gave me a real scientific foundation in which to base my clinical work. At the time, I was also getting my master's in business administration and healthcare. So I was also thinking a lot about leadership and the role of staff health and wellness. And so one of the real things that I really started looking at right away is if I'm going to really help people on their trauma-informed care journey, in other words, how do I start to introduce the concept of trauma-informed care? It is critical that we have healthy organizations, healthy staff delivering that care. In fact, I feel really confident to say that if staff aren't healthy, that is where you start. Don't think about changing how services are delivered. Really start with the health of the workforce. Obviously, we have been through an unprecedented time of trauma. COVID's the one that sticks out to a lot of us. And going through, and I want to respect the folks here that were in the dark days of the HIV crisis, because I came in after my work in HIV started after the medical cocktails about 2003, 2004, where we were lucky enough to have drugs on the market at that point. But I think just for our entire society getting hit with COVID, which is obviously still with us, still impacting our communities, But even before that, I think for a lot of us, I will stay apolitical here, but the 2016 election stirred up so much within our communities, within our families, within ourselves as well. And we've also had the biggest civil rights movement in my lifetime. I think, one that stands out is Black Lives Matter, but we know there's been a whole lot of legislation. I haven't seen any in California. I know we've actually taken positive steps here in Colorado, but for a lot of our trans friends around the country, LGBTQ, women's reproductive rights, obviously Black Lives Matter. I know just paying attention to the news and what's going on in LA County right now with, I think, your city council or county council. LA politics have always been a confusing mess to me, but no, tensions are high again around race. And so we've just been through all this, an election, a land war over in Europe, all this stuff going on. And so we've been through this unprecedented time. And I want to really challenge you. Maybe you need permission to do this. Maybe it's a challenge for you. I will just admit I'm going to push you. I don't have a whole lot of time to get you to like me. So I'm just going to challenge the heck out of you in this training. If you give me 3 hours, I build the relationship, I get you to laugh a little bit, then I would challenge you. I just got to jump right into it. And my first challenge is really to think about the next 6 to 12 months as a time of recovery. To really put forth the challenge. And I would say to prioritize this challenge right alongside patient care. 1 and 2 right there. I'm encouraging people in clinics. It's probably not the time to start a new strategic planning process. It's probably not a time to change how you deliver services. It's time right now to say, how do we take a workforce that's been through so much trauma, so much stress, and help them recover? And that's going to take probably more so than a week or 2. It's going to take probably 6 to 12 months. I just spoke at the Northwest Regional Primary Care Association meeting. I had a room packed full of leaders, and I just got reinforced how much folks are struggling right now. So I want to explore this with you, give a way to think about this recovery, give you some concrete tools as well that you can hopefully start to think about implementing to help people regain their mental health. So one of the things we talk about in trauma-informed care is something called protective factors. In other words, we know that if certain variables are in place before the trauma hits, people are more likely to experience what we call a trauma recovery, where they don't take the pain, the suffering of trauma sort of into their medium to long-term future. And we know that before the pandemic hit, which is, I think this study, I think 2017 is when this study was done, we weren't in good shape to begin with. This is what we need to recognize, we need to own, is there's something broken in a system here, healthcare, also education. Something is broken when an industry is destroying its workforce. So if you look at who are the most mentally challenged people based on occupation, let's say you packed, is it crypto something, the old Staples Center, but you pack that full of professionals in your community, you had some mental health resources, all you knew was people's occupation. Who would you want to get up and get help immediately? Physicians, nurses, social service workers, which for most of our health clinics, I like to say are pretty much everybody else, from the front desk folks to the social workers, the case managers, the peer support. Pretty much so many of the other folks fall into this social services. Is we would call our staff. If you wanted to find the most burned out facility, space in your community, it would probably be our fairly qualified health centers, our safety social net hospitals. So we weren't doing good before this happened. And the unique challenge that this faces us with is if we go back to this reality, we're in a lot of trouble. In fact, we're in this point where it's like, I don't know if healthcare is sustainable. There's a analogy that a lot of folks who talk about self-care use. It's when you're on the airplane, you're supposed to put on your mask before you help someone else put theirs on. And it's a decent analogy. I'm a sucker for a good analogy. But when you look at statistically speaking, the plane is crashing. So yeah, we can challenge people to put on their mask. But if the plane is crashing, what is an oxygen mask going to do? It might keep you alive for a few more minutes, but we got to get up and fix the plane. And why I love working with groups, and honestly, it's just a huge honor to work with CCALAC, is that you all have a collective voice. You can talk as a collective. You can talk about your experience. You can advocate for change. And that's one challenge I want to put on your plate. We need to build a healthier system, and don't lose your voice. You're part of CCALC. There's a collective voice there. And I will tell you something, I will put additional pressure on you because we got our own work to do. What you do in California just sort of rolls across the country. So I'm at least a fan, and if I can be a support, I will. Then the other thing that I saw happen recently is the death of self-care. I like to, it's kind of a joke, but it's actually true. I think self-care, at least the term self-care, died the third week of December 2001. I say that because I did 3 trainings on self-care in the first couple of weeks of December. And by the third week of December, I just felt like there was so much angst against this term that I just started taking it out of my slides. I started to change the title of my slides. This self-care, the term self-care, was becoming the trigger. I think there's some good lessons in us for here as leaders. Is why is this idea of self-care now seen as a negative thing? Well, one, and there's a lot of research to back this up, it's unfair to burn people and traumatize, burnout or traumatize people at work and expect them to take their personal time to recover. That it's not really fair, right? Also, that we historically, and I think the message that a lot of our folks get is that if you're burned out, the failure is on you as an individual. If you're burned out, the failure is on you as an individual. We can say, no, our system is destroying its workforce, which leaves leaders like yourself, unfortunately, trying to create bubbles of wellness within a dysfunctional system. It's what we have to do. It's what we have to strive to do. But this is why we need system change as well. I know that's not going to happen tomorrow just because I say it out loud. But we need to find our collective voices, work with your associations. We've got to start advocating for change to build a system that keeps our workforce healthy. I know that's a long-term battle, but it's one we've got to fight. The key thing here, and really if you take away one key thing from this training, this is the thing I'd like to be a little sticky in your brain. Something you might remember a couple months from now, even maybe if I'm really ambitious a year or so from now. And that's this dilemma. And when we talk about the term self-care, sort of stirring up anger in people, we as leaders sit with this dilemma. And I love dilemmas because it really states the problem. And it's a problem we need to talk to our staff about, talk in the C-suite about, talk to our boards about. On one hand, and here's the staff responsibility, self-care, we may use a different term, but the reality is that personal behavior really impacts performance in a powerful way. You want to bring your best self to work tomorrow? If I just had between now and tomorrow morning when you go into work, number one thing I put on the list to bring your best self to work tomorrow, probably get 8 hours of sleep. Eat a healthy meal. Go for a walk around the block. I'm assuming it's like 75 degrees in Southern California right now and sunny. Go for a walk, get some movement in. Those personal things to do. So there are still personal parts that we have to take responsibility for. The second part of the dilemma, though, is that organizational factors also have a huge impact on this as well. So we have to hold this dilemma and say, okay, we know personal behavior, personal action is going to really impact performance, but also organizational factors are also going to impact that as well. Now, early on in the pandemic, I was given a really true, powerful gift, and that was to work with nurses from New York in April, May of 2020. And why I call that as a gift is that I really got a very strong indication of a couple things. One, how devastating COVID was, how devastating to our workforce that COVID had the potential to be, already knowing, because I was doing these trainings pre-COVID as well, already knowing we were incredibly vulnerable. We were already the most burned out industry you could find. And I just saw the trauma that this was impacting on those nurses. And I knew this was going to come to all of our communities in some way or the other. So I also had a lot of free time on my hands, because at the time, about 85% of my work was in-person trainings. So I went to a really dark place, a place I don't like to visit very often, a place I try to avoid at all costs, and that's peer-reviewed journal articles, because they just bore the heck out of me. I don't know why we write them the way they do, but they're just the most devastatingly boring things to watch. But I went in there, I went to that dark place to see, what does the research show as we come out of this, knowing that we were in survival mode for so long. So when I got to talk to folks like you, the folks, the heroes that kept the doors open, kept providing services to often underserved populations, to continue to give hope to resources to the community when this devastating wave of trauma, and at the time I didn't even realize civil rights movement was going to hit. I already knew the politics was already crazy at the time, where we've had all these challenges. How do we start to look at our recovery? And the good news is, day one of my journey into those journals, there was a model that just popped up called the Job Demands and Resources model. One, it checked off two boxes for me. The first one was, I had 20 plus years, almost 25 years of research behind it. So it had a whole lot of evidence. So I had confidence I could bring this to you, and there was years, decades of research behind it. Two, any training that I do, the core reason I do trainings is to improve outcomes, whether I'm talking about trauma-informed care, staff resiliency, leadership. I'm a big nerd for motivational interviewing as well. I'm always asking, how do we get better patient outcomes? And so the goal of this is to really get the best outcomes possible for our patients, for our communities. Again, the research also allows us for the financial health of our organizations as well, for turnover rates, for staff morale, for staff performance as well. So both the business side and the clinical side, we know we're going to maximize performance outcomes of what drives our mission, but also what keeps financially our doors open as well. So job demands, just a really quick definition here. I just want to show you I did my homework more than anything else. Physical, social, emotional, organizational aspects of a job that require sustained effort and are associated with certain physiological and psychological costs. You might just say that's stress, right? Yes. Now there's good stress, there's bad stress. We'll take a look at that briefly here, but you can think about this is the stress inherent to the work. Now, from the individual perspective, I want to give you an analogy. Now, if you gave me an extra hour, I have a brain slide. I'd love to nerd out about the autonomic nervous system, ventral vagal, prefrontal cortex, amygdala, sympathetic. It might be good if you're not a brain nerd like I am, that I'm just going to give you a simple analogy to think about this. But I like to use a cup analogy to really summarize a lot of complex science around stress and how its impact on the mind and body. So really two parts of the analogy. The first is the size of the cup. This is really our capacity to hold stress. So we know this is reflected in our neurobiology, the prefrontal cortex's ability to regulate the amygdala, ventral vagal to regulate the sympathetic response. So we can see this in our mind, but also our body psychologically, so that really our resiliency. So we want to do things each and every day, part of our raising performance, to keep ourselves healthy, our mind, our bodies as sharp and healthy as possible. That's going to create a big capacity to hold stress. The second part of the analogy is the amount of water in the stress. This roughly represents the amount of cortisol or stress hormones in your body at any given time. So again, when I talk about staff resiliency, we're doing things, and this we'll talk about wellness plans here in a second. We want to do things each and every day to keep our resiliency high, and then also have strategies to manage the amount of stress that we put in our cup every day, every week, etc. And so I always like to think about managing the different streams of stress going into our cup. On one hand, and I don't have time to really get into definitions here, just the amount of workload we have. I say that's kind of burnout, but we also know this idea of empathetic intensity and emotions are contagious. In the trauma world, we've got labels like secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, compassion fatigue. Also, and seems to be at an all-time high right now, moral distress and injury, moral distress being that I have to something, and I think this is one of the reasons we burn out so quickly in healthcare. The healthcare, the industry, not necessarily the clinic, but the industry, we know what kind of care the person needs, but because of the system, we're not allowed to provide the type of care we want. During the pandemic, I know just because of a lot of reasons, we weren't maybe able to deliver the quality of care or the amount of care, or maybe we lost people in the virtual environment. So these all have been at an all-time high. Also, just personal stress. One of the things that's unique, and I think there'll be books written about this, going into the future, is that before the pandemic, a lot of the stressors I talked about were work stress or personal stress. That I could box things up pretty nicely. For example, electronic medical records, that's definitely work distress, right? That changing that, implementing that, work distress. Talking to somebody or dealing with or working with somebody that is going through a trauma, that can be empathetic intensity, but that's happening at work, or it might be happening in your personal life, but there was a barrier. When we talked about COVID, I'd say it's equal parts impacting our work, the patients we care so deeply about, but also, am I going to be okay? Is my family going to be okay? Is my parents going to be okay? So it would hit that as well. Political environment, same thing. I'm imagining that showed up in your waiting room a few times here and there, but some of us may not be talking to family members that we were talking before the 2016 election. And then the civil rights movement, it challenged us at work. If you didn't, I think probably knowing my audience, you probably had the challenge of, can we do better? Can we do better around racial equity with our staff, with our services? It was a time for us all to pause. I know as a white male, I need to look hard in the mirror and say, where could I do better? And try to identify those areas for improvement as well. And how do I bring this? How do I do better in my talks to bring what I'm really pushing myself to learn and integrate even more into this arena? So all these sort of transition, that nice boundary, they used to exist when we talked about these big stressors. Then we know things take a little bit of a drop going into our cup and basically turns on the fire hose. Two key things that we saw: uncertainty and importance. And this is why a lot of people experience trauma during the last several years. I'm not going to say it has been traumatic for you, but I know just talking to people that the level of stress that they've been dealing with, that if they use the word traumatic to describe their experience, I'm not going to spend a second arguing that they're not right. So when we think about uncertainty and importance, not being able to predict what happens increases the impact of the stress. And then if it's important to you, so the patients we care about, the family members we care about, social justice, health equity, all these things we care deeply about that really peaked throughout the last several years. So a traumatic events that involve intense amount of stress that overwhelms our ability to cope. It's like dumping that cup into a bucket of stress. It just overwhelms our ability to cope, where that trauma just dominates our existence for a period of time. Now, the third intensifier here is duration. And this is where I think a lot of us find ourselves in trouble right now, really struggling with our mental health, because it's been too long. It's been too long to be under this intense amount of stress, whether you want to start the clock at COVID, whether you want to go back to the 2016 election, maybe even things in your community were happening before that. I want to give you the definition of chronic trauma, which has many of the same symptoms, the mental health impacts, as a traumatic event, which is a little bit more obvious when we work with folks. But chronic trauma, living in a high stress environment, that was healthcare before all this hit, and in the shadow of threat traumatic events happening at any given time. This was really helpful when my work in homelessness. Somebody could experience homelessness and go weeks maybe months, maybe even years without a traumatic event happening. But we know just surviving homelessness really challenges that resiliency for an extended period of time. And we can now measure how that can really wreck the functioning of the nervous system. So again, we're really got a lot of people who have been holding too much stress for too long. So when we work on filling out this top line of the job demands and resources model, I do want to state that I put helping fatigue here as an umbrella term over burnout. I think it better encapsulates the moral distress and injury, secondary vicarious trauma than just the word burnout. If burnout works better for you, just replace that in your head. But really, we're looking at, there's a huge amount of distress coming out of the work. Historically, the healthcare industry, and please here, I'm talking about the industry in general, you may be running the best run, healthiest workforce in all of healthcare. I have no data to say one way or the other, but historically, the distress of the work has overcome the resources we've given our staff to handle that stress. This has led to alarming rates of burnout. Pre-pandemic, you were seeing statistics, even coming out of the American Medical Association, that 53%, again, pre-pandemic, of physicians were experiencing severe symptoms of burnout. That was pre-COVID. So we've lost this battle historically. What is the impact of this? Declining health. Now, when we say declining health, medical health, absolutely yes. Work stress, we can see things like diabetes, stroke, cancer, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of medical health issues. Also mental health. We know the amygdala, sympathetic is more active. So anxiety disorder, depression, negative worldview, those sort of things. Then we also cognitive ability. We actually see our IQ, our cognitive performance drops as well. Another result of this, which is closely connected to the emotional regulation that we start to lose, is our ability to connect with people socially as well. I've heard a lot of times, my marriage broke up because of work stress. We all know what it's like to work with somebody who's burned out. It burns everybody else out. And this leads to negative outcomes. So again, pre-pandemic, I was trying to get everybody's attention. We need to do better on this. Now, again, we just know with every statistic I see coming out post-COVID that a bad situation is that much worse. So we've got to step up to this challenge. This is the reality that we're facing. Doesn't mean we're helpless not to build this back. So we're going to talk about job resources, but I do want to take a second to talk about resiliency and wellness planning. Just because I don't want to use self-care anymore doesn't mean, again, part of performance is what the individual does in their personal life, their lifestyle choices, whether or not they practice something like mindfulness, how their personal trauma, how they're handling that. Things that we may not have much, if any, control over. I'll give you some resources about ideas to talk about that stuff. But, you know, I'm assuming you're not going doing house checks at night to make sure everybody's getting 8 hours of sleep. This is where the personal responsibility comes in. So I like to think about this, and I'll give you a template in those resources as well if you're interested. And I want to speak about this, gives me a chance to speak about maybe we're hiring some new people. Maybe we're bringing in some new folks who are excited. They're maybe it's their first job out of college, or they're just coming in fresh. And here's the challenge to y'all as leaders, which is a really difficult one. You've got somebody ready to come in, ready to do good work, excited about joining your clinic. But if your clinic's like most I talk to, there's a high level of burnout. You stick a healthy, energetic person in a team that's burned out, that team is going to burn that really excited person out probably within weeks. So one of the things we want to do with these concrete plans, what is the proactive plan? And again, think about this as people that are doing well right now. In other words, what are you going to do each and every day to bring your best self to work? Again, we want to support these with job resources, but this is where the personal responsibility comes in as well. Two, so again, we're still talking about the healthy people, is because we work in such a burnout industry, we're going to tip our toes into this. And I have a whole nother training about the stages of helping fatigue. The first stage is exhaustion. We've all been there. Many of us are way past the exhaustion stage. But what we want to do and what we want to support is helping them identify, how do you know you're in exhaustion? How does your body tell you? How's your mind tell you? How's your social behaviors tell you that you're just holding on to too much stress? And then having a reactive plan to get yourself out of those stages and back into health and wellness. So when I talk about reactive plan, I'm talking about simple stuff. For me, it's a 3-day weekend. That's my reactive plan. There's nothing else on the plan. I know that, and I've got data over this, biometric data now that I have to even show it and prove it, is that get an extra day off on the weekend just allows me to refresh. If I take it soon enough, a 3-day weekend, that extra day is enough to get me back in to that stage. Most people right now, and I'm trying to keep my finger on the pulse here of healthcare when I talk to folks across the country. What I really challenge you to do, and one of the things I think is a must right now in health centers, everyone needs a recovery plan. Everyone needs to sit down personally and say, okay, I've been through whatever I've been through. I know my cup's been full for too long. How am I going to take the next 6 to 12 months utilizing the resources that my clinic, my organization gives me, using some personal strategies that I know improve my mental health to get myself out of this declining health stage and bring my best self to work. So again, I'm going to give you a template, a link, a template to the end. I know you're in LA County, so you got a lot of professionals to do this. Might be worth bringing somebody from the outside in to help do a little retreat. A lot of people are finding like a retreat setting with this can be really useful. A half day. I know anytime you shut down a clinic, it's hard, but just having a half day team building, planning, resiliency planning, brainstorming can be a really big event for folks as part of launching their recovery plans. Now, the other thing is really managing job demands. So the distress that comes out of job demands partly is because things have changed so rapidly. So what is one way we can take some research in here that we know helps people feel less stressed out about their work and really take advantage of the moment? And this is really setting expectations. Now, I know I might have some HR folks on here, so I want to be very clear. Listen to your HR professionals. They trump me every time. I don't know California employment law. Your HR professional does. So I want you to take everything I say in context within that scope. We have historically, and I think most HR people probably agree with what I'm going to say next here, we have historically done a pretty bad job of setting expectations about jobs. There's some research out there that most people, when asked, will say, when asked, do you know what your supervisor expects from you? They say no. The frustrating kicker is they don't ask for clarification. Now, here's where I think we've been lazy historically, not HR folks, leaders like me, is we fall back on the job descriptions. But I guarantee you, I know the last bullet point on your job descriptions, all other duties as assigned. You could say it with me if we were in a room together. So what does that tell the brain? Basically, anything my boss tells me to do, that's part of my job description. Why I think that allows us to be lazy is I can tell you to do things that might not be on the other bullet points without having a discussion. Maybe I need to take something off your plate. Maybe I need to pay you more if I'm asking you to do more. So I think that we've just been lazy with this, honestly. This is a time to sit down because jobs have changed so much during the pandemic. Really sitting down, being concrete, revisiting those job descriptions. I know that last bullet point is going to stay on there. I've lost that fight many times over. I'm okay with losing, but really talking about people, okay, let's really talk about what your job is after all this back and forth to virtual environments, this, that, and the other. And also these conversations open up the window to talk about helping establish a wellness plan, talking about work-life balances, really helping them think about personally, professionally, what they need the next 6 to 12 months to fully recover. Here is the unfortunate truth as well. I told you might not like me on all these slides. You're going to be the role model for this, and I'm worried about you all right now. Why am I worried about leaders? You have sacrificed so much over the last several years. You have sacrificed probably your time. You may have sacrificed and put your own health at risk. I know what you have done is you've given to your staff, you've given to your community. Well, a lot of us are also the people that give to our family, and families look for advice. A lot of leaders right now I know are just absolutely toast. So when we talk about this, people are going to look to your behavior, not your words, your behavior. And so we've got to get our leadership healthy again as well. If you are burned out, you are not going to be the person that's going to help other people get healthy. So again, we can be vulnerable with this. When I talk about creating wellness plans across the organization, I encourage leaders, you got to have one. And I also encourage you to share that with the folks that you supervise, the folks on your team. In other words, my challenge is you're going to hold them accountable to their plan, making sure they follow through. You want to give them permission to also hold you accountable as well. We're in this together. Now, we're not going to yell at each other to hold each other accountable, but we want to have that accountability to each other. All right. So we start to fill out the blanks here. The other part of this with the job resources, one is we offset demand. Two, it can be a part of motivation. I'm going to focus more on the first bullet point here. So again, just to show you, I went into those peer-reviewed journal articles. Job resources are the physical, social, emotional, organizational aspects of the job that do any of the following. The one I'm going to focus on is reduce job demands and the associated physiological and psychological costs. In other words, how do we position our resources to address the distress inherent to the work of healthcare, knowing that distress has been at an all-time high for most people for years now? How are we going to use resources to help people get back into health and wellness? Just as a note here, job resources can also help people reach their work goals, stimulate personal growth and development as well. One of the things I want to talk about here, because then this is where I'm going to just admit, I'm going to push you. And I may push you and ask you to think about things that you currently are not structured or funded to do. But I'm going to throw these out, because if you ask, Matt, I know you've seen across the board in healthcare, we are a mess right now. And again, the average clinic is really struggling with the mental health of their workforce right now. May not be you, but that's what I see the averages. The typical clinic is really struggling right now. So knowing that we are in an emergency, I heard some feds talk at a national conference a couple months ago. The analogy that just stuck with me is, we weren't trying to prevent the car from going off the cliff. We weren't trying to prevent people from getting burnt out. The takeaway I got from the feds was the car's already driven off the cliff. Can we keep anybody in the car alive? That's really, and I've never heard that negative of a message, especially during keynote addresses. Like, I just came away really scared for us, because the data they were seeing was really devastating of what the hell. So I'm going to push you, which it's kind of unfair, I will admit, to push people who have already given so much. But I'm going to try to answer the question in the next few slides, the next 17 minutes or so I have with you. What do we need for this recovery? Now, I'm going to be a bad trainer just for a second, take a sidebar down to engagement. A year or so from now, after a recovery plan, if you want me to talk about engagement, peak performance, motivation, I'm happy to come back. I do want to just put this on the radar. Engagement, positive, fulfilling work-related state of mind characterized by grit, passion, perseverance, and dedication, importance, pride, and challenges. Why I get here is for this slide. I've got to give you this slide because it really supports this idea of supportive supervision. Whether or not staff feel their leaders care about their well-being is the #1 predictor of organizational engagement. What's going to lead to the best outcomes possible for our patients, our clinics, our organizations, whether or not we've got an engaged workforce. Gallup has just done amazing research around this over the years, especially my friends in HR that are on this call. You know about the Gallup 12. I think it's the most powerful piece of organizational research I've seen in my career. Really talks about an 8-to-1 ratio of engagement. So world-class organizations have 8 engaged employees for every 1 disengaged. Think about what we see with these statistics, though. The number one predictor, only about a little under 40% feel like this is true. 50% felt like their well-being didn't matter at all, their leaders, and only 10% felt like a vital asset to their organization. We got to do better. And we may think, oh, we're in healthcare, we do better than this. Who has the most burned out workforce? That would be us. So there may be some room for improvement here. Now, supportive supervision, I just want to throw it out there. I don't care what you call this. You can call this coaching. You can call this mentorship. Some don't like supervision. I don't care what words you use. What 90, probably 5% plus of people in your organization. So the only folks this doesn't apply to is maybe those folks who are extremely introverted. They may be the exception to this rule, but the number way people manage and recover stress is to get support from somebody else who they feel cares about them, somebody that they trust. Again, the number one way that most of us, the vast majority of us, regulate our stress response, where we're cognitively our best self, socially, emotionally, physically healthy, is if we have somebody to support us through the stress that we're experiencing. In psychology, we call that co-regulation. So here's part of what you're not, a lot of you won't like what I'm going to say next, but we do a horrible job of this in healthcare. I don't understand why we do such a terrible job of this in healthcare. It's like, well, you've got an MD behind your name, or you're a nurse, so you don't need any support again in your career. I just don't understand how it developed the way it did. However, until we get our butts off those top categories for burnout, until we get out of this crisis that we're in, how do we provide that relational support to staff? Pre-pandemic, when I was making this argument, I was saying at least 30 minutes every 2 weeks. And if you see kind of the cringe in my voice, I promise I don't have gas or anything like that. I don't know if that's enough right now. Maybe an hour every 2 weeks, a half hour a week. And I cringe when I say this because I want you to hear this from my heart. I've managed program budgets most of my career. If you're not set up to do that, I'm throwing a challenge on your plate that may be really difficult. Why do I think thinking about this is important? Again, one, it's the best way we regulate stress. Two, I believe right now what's really important is, as a leader, I need to answer the question, everybody I supervise, how are they doing this week? I need to know how they are doing. And because I'm going to be the one providing those resources to help them stay or get healthy, I need to know how they're doing. I need to know how well my staff are doing. And it takes time to build trust and safety. Trust and safety are so important to healthy cultures, performance. To do that, we need time to do that. If we do it, it pays off in the stress response, in burnout rates, and in performance. So trying to figure out, how do we support our staff relationally? But it's not just about their wellness. Wellness, to me, number one right now. How are you doing this week? How can I support you with your wellness plan? Is there anything we can do? Scheduling vacation time, whatever that might be. Wellness to me is the number one priority, but we also do other things here as well. The other is professional development. I am who I am today. I sort of grew up professionally in high supervisory environments. I usually had a supervisor who I met with weekly. That's why I'm who I am today, because I have great people who still serve in my life as mentors, if they can tolerate my energy, to help me be who I am today. People I still bounce off questions on and get their feedback on. So one of the things that really pisses me off is, well, it doesn't piss me off, but it bothers the heck out of me, is how we currently handle professional development in a lot of healthcare settings. Yeah, we'll have an employee evaluation once a year. We'll set goals and objectives. And we might, if we're good, sometimes we'll check in on that in 3 months, but we're not supporting people to become better. You really give somebody a mentor, they're going to perform better in their job. And then there's the administrative side of this things. And to me, this is where the payoff of this is. What I have found in every environment, whether it's healthcare, public health, social services, even education, where historically they've had no piece. Whenever I've been a leader in these environments, I always work to get at least that half hour every 2 weeks, and I really shoot for at least a half hour a week. Why I believe it pays off: if I have an open door policy, which everybody has an open door policy, by the way, what comes through that door is often problems. If I'm meeting with people on a regular basis, I identify issues. Usually an issue, a few things, a conversation solves the problem. When it becomes a problem, or solves the issue, sorry, when it rises to the problem, now there's greater conflict within the team. That problem is more disruptive. I've got to spend a lot more time fixing a problem, whereas I catch issues that I can fix relatively quickly. So again, I want to push you on this. I want you to answer, no matter what you call it, no matter how you do it, how are you going to provide regular relational support to co-regulate your staff and support recovery? You throw professional development and administrative in there as well, I'm just giving you bonus points. A couple of other things to really focus on, very concrete here. Now, before I get into time off, I want to recognize something. I know a lot of clinics now, not all of them, but a lot of clinics are struggling to maintain and get fully staffed with their workforce, that there's a shortage in a lot of clinics right now, which makes this more difficult, and honestly is going to make recovery, keeping the existing staff healthy. I'm not going to say it's impossible. Nothing's impossible, but it's just going to make it that much more difficult. So I want to recognize that challenge before I get to these some of these final slides. So time off. Let's talk about this from several different perspectives. One thing that we need to do differently in healthcare is to have people disconnect from the work. Think about recovery as a verb. When I say that, what do I mean? I'm a big fan of the movie The Matrix series. And I like to think about when you go into work, you kind of plug into the Matrix, where they stick that long needle in the back of your head. You basically plug into work stress. And throughout the day, you're going to have more and more stress in your cup. That's what we call a job. Then when you leave, you unplug and you go into recovery mode. What is recovery mode? Two things are happening. One, I have stopped adding work stress to my cup. Second, I'm doing some of my own resiliency and wellness strategies. I'm practicing a little mindfulness. I'm going to a yoga class. I'm walking around the block. I'm getting a good night's sleep. Things that we know will get some of that stress out of the cup and decrease your stress level so you can bring your best self to work the next day. What are too many of us doing in this modern work environment? We go home, but then, maybe we get dinner made, maybe not, but then we plug back into emails, to work. And what we do is two things when we do that. One, we stop the recovery. So all that recovery we're getting by disconnecting, practicing, we stop it. And not every email is going to tell you what a beautiful, wonderful person you are and what great work you did today. We're going to add additional stress to that cup. Now, I want to be very clear. Are you going to have to work some evenings? Yeah. Are you going to have to work some weekends? Yes, you're going to have big projects due, but there's something inherently wrong with jobs that require you to be on 24/7. Now, some folks, part of their job is being on call. I think we can also do that better as well. If somebody's on call, in other words, they're on call for a week, can we give them the next Friday afternoon off to compensate for that? What can we do better? The other big thing here, and I know this is not going to get you to love me either here, but in everything I've learned about stress, having written books about stress, having written books about trauma, researching it for the last 20 years, one thing we know about stress and trauma is to recover from stress and trauma, you got to get away from the stressor. Going to work every day for 8, 9, 10 hours a day, continuing exposing yourself to the stress and trauma of work, it's nearly going to be impossible to recover. So what do people need? This is why I'm saying, think about recovery, get the calendar out for the next 6 to 12 months. People need vacations. Now, there may be exceptions to that rule. I'm not saying everybody, But most people, I think if I look what people need, they probably need a month away from work in the next 12 months to have a chance at recovery. And I know what I'm saying might be hard. And I'm even going to go further. I think they probably need two-week vacations, honestly. Why do I say 2-week vacations? We know, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit too, that when we go on vacation, let's say we're taking a Friday after work till we're coming back to work the next Monday. So traditional week vacation is our cortisol level, our heart rate variability, everything trends really positively for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of vacation. We're at this peak, beautiful spot if we're not checking emails and working during vacation. If you're working during vacation, don't call it a vacation. You're just working with a different view. But then what we see is our stress levels about Thursday, Friday start to go back up as we start to freak out about how many new emails, voicemails that we're going to have. So 1 week vacation, we kind of hit optimal recovery, and then our stress levels start to increase. Still a good thing. Don't get me wrong. With a 2-week vacation, what the science shows us is we get 8 days of that recovery. Now, that 8 days of recovery is, I believe, going to be key to getting people back healthy again. I know it can be hard to schedule, but we just see the science. The payoff for this is productivity increases, mental health increases for the next 12 months after a 2-week vacation. There are amazing benefits to this that are definitely worth the investment if you can do it. Other thing that I want to challenge, and I know what I'm talking about is maybe not having as many billable hours, so I understand what I'm asking here. But we also can do this better, people. What do we do? Why do people's stress levels start to rise on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday? It's because of how we handle vacations. Vacation, we should see paid time off as an investment. We're investing. It's like putting money in the stock market. We double our money. We pile up all the cash, but then how we handle it is like we set it on fire and burn it all up, because we don't transition people back from vacations well. We ask people, hey, Monday morning when you come back, you're going to do your typical Monday stuff, and you're going to catch up from everything you missed. How many people on this call have been burned out by the next Tuesday after they take a vacation? It's dumb how we do this. So can you give folks a half day off the Monday back? Can you give them 4 hours just to catch up? If they take a 2-week vacation, can you give them a full day to catch up? What you're going to do is you're going to maximize that investment. So let's think about this differently. There's no reason to have somebody on vacation for 2 weeks if the next Tuesday or Wednesday back, they're so overwhelmed, they go back to a spot they were even before the vacation. So how we handle this is important too. The final real piece I want to focus on here is therapy. I believe that most people who've experienced trauma throughout the last several years, therapy is going to be a big component of their recovery. In fact, I'm really going to encourage you to think about therapy. We are really well trained. Most therapists are really well trained, especially those that end up in EAP programs, employee assistance programs, to help you deal with work stress. That's something we're pretty good at. And usually you get about 6 free sessions with an EAP. You can go a lot of ways with that. That's a lot of time when we talk about recovering from burnout. But therapy gives us a great example of resetting how we talk about providing job resources. What have we done historically? And I'm guilty of this as well, is I know you're struggling at work. I'm like, hey, I know this is, you're not feeling healthy right now. Here's a card with the EAP's number on it. Please call. I really want you to stay healthy. I really think you could benefit from this. So the message I'm giving is, I know work is really hurting your mental health. Please take, again, your own time. I've been in LA traffic, even sometimes going like 5 miles in LA County can take half a day. Please find childcare, whatever it needs to do for that situation, to go get therapy on your own time to recover from the stress and trauma we've caused you at work. So here's a chance for us to reset this. Now, if they're going through personal stuff, I feel very, very, very great giving that card, supporting them with that resource. But because so much of the trauma has happened in the work environment, here's a chance for us to do it different. At the very least, you need to be the role model for this. Don't hand them a card. Think about the difference of the message. You know, I've been struggling as well on and off throughout this pandemic. I thought I could benefit from some mental health services. I called. It took me about 2 weeks to get the appointment. Had to go through a little bit of an assessment. Really helped me though to talk to somebody about everything I've been through. I feel so much lighter now. How different that is, right? You are the role model. Let me push you just a little bit further with the last minute or so I have with you though, is that can we bring therapy in-house? And the answer may be honestly no. But I'd like you to reach out to your EAP and hey, can you have somebody come to our site twice a week, 3 times a week? We're going to fill up whatever capacity you give us on site. And can you, if you believe, if you've sort of, and I don't think I have to make an argument here, that the work of healthcare has been traumatic and has burnt basically the most of the workforce, if not our entire workforce, out, could we allow them not to clock out? Can we, in other words, pay them to go to therapy? Think about the different message that is. Again, was the number one thing for engagement? Whether or not you believe that your leadership cares about you as a person. What a better way that we can do in letting them do this. So I just wanted to throw up, I know we got an extra half hour for questions and breakout groups, and I don't want to steal any of that time from you. I put some recognition slides in this deck. Really a focus on recognition. I've given you some best practices here. I think can really change the mindset from the negative one that burnout leaves us with to a more positive one. So I wanted to leave my email up here. Here are the handouts I mentioned. I've also published a book recently. You can download this for free at the optimalhrv.com handouts. It's titled Heart Rate Variability. What that is, it's a measure of the stress response. So I do a deeper dive into the neurobiology of stress and trauma on the brain nervous system. You know, but I really look at this from a leadership perspective and how we can have conversations around sleep hygiene, how we can maybe think differently about nutrition, movement, and how to really frame some of these conversations. As well, you'll find in there a still in my brain, the staff resiliency and wellness plan, a template that I've developed. So you've got my email here. If nothing else, I love talking about this stuff. If I can support you in any way, please do not hesitate to reach out. I'd love to get you any resources, any help that I can. So with that, I'm sorry I went a minute over. Oh, now 2 minutes over. But I want to make sure I don't take up any more of your time because I know I want to give you plenty of time to talk with each other.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. There was a lot of great content that you went over. So thank you for sharing all of those resources and information. So we're going to go straight into actually before that, if folks have any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves if you have any questions for Matt before we go into the breakout session, or also use the chat to ask any questions that you have for him. All right. All right, I see something coming in. All right. Okay, all right, let's go into the breakout sessions and kind of expand some of our conversation around what wellness looks like at your clinic. So we're going to take about 12 minutes or so, and these are the questions that we have for you all today. So what do you do for your own self-care? How do you support your staff in managing their workload? And then the last question is kind of like a couple of parts to this question. Discuss the outline of your employee wellness program. If your clinic does not have one, what would it look like and what resources would you need to implement it? So we're going to type those questions into the chat and we'll get you started into the breakouts. All right, and Crystal just put the questions in the chat, and Aisha's going to open up the breakout rooms shortly. Her starting to come back about 15 seconds before the breakout rooms close so that everybody returns. All right, great. All right, so it looks like we're all back now. Welcome back. So I'm just curious if maybe one or two folks would like to share maybe some of the discussion that you had in your groups. That would be great. Kind of jumped into all of the breakout rooms, so you all had pretty rich conversations going on. Alexa, sorry, I don't want to call you out, but would you mind sharing a little bit of your discussion in your group?
Sure. We only got to 1 and 2, but for the self-care, we heard a lot of great ones. Someone said exercise, doing like meditations in the morning, I think was something, or some mindful moments in the morning was something that everybody sort of have agreed on. Taking those 2-week vacations, so that was really helpful. In terms of supporting staff, I heard icebreakers. I heard just being very mindful of the staff's sort of capacity and taking on things when, and something that I really liked was when you have the capacity to take on something else to offload the workload off of your team. And so long as it doesn't sacrifice your own well-being, doing that for them whenever you can, checking in with them, doing icebreakers. So we'd love to hear number 3, but we didn't get to number 3.
All
Some
right.
great conversations we had.
All right, great. Thank you so much for sharing. Did anybody get to question 3, wellness programs at your clinic? And if you do not have one established, what resources would you need for that? Would anybody like to share a little bit of that question if you got around to it? Deb, did your group get around to that question? No. Okay. That's okay. All right. Thank you all. I hope that, I encourage the continued, discussions back with your groups at your clinics and also in your coaching sessions, right? This is a great opportunity to kind of expand those conversations and figure out what things, you need to establish in your clinics. So Matt is still here. If folks have questions for Matt, I'd like to give an opportunity for that as well before we close out. The poll that we usually put up is up for you to fill out. And then at this time, I would like to, if no other questions, you can either unmute yourselves or you can use the chat feature as well to for any last questions for Matt at this point. Okay. Matt, thank you so much. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. So just kind of, we're just, Bennett's Family Clinic is going through its strategic planning right now for the next few years. And, I'm curious how we can take like that recovery kind of like be sensitive to the recovery, because it just seems like our survival has always depended so much on growth.
Yes.
And change and take this on and this on. And it's kind of a really special time. And if we keep on going like this, I'm not so sure like if we can help it much, but like what would you recommend?
Yeah. So, if I'm honest with you, because I love strategic planning, there's like nothing better to spend the afternoon strategic planning. I really love that. And I understand healthcare is such a dynamic environment that you are going, things are probably going to look different next month. Look, remember when monkeypox, we all thought we were going to have to do, who knows what it hits. I would just say, if you can think about maybe adding a goal or 2 for staff wellness as part of the strategic plan. Again, let's get just real concrete. What are you going to do the next 12 months to support staff health and wellness? That might be retention. How do we try to prevent turnover? How do we, look at utilizing PTO? How do we support staff mental health through therapeutic services, EAP, those sort of things? So I would really prioritize it like your strategic planning. Like, what are we going to do? And there only may be like 4 or 5 objectives there. I don't think it has to be, you don't need to pay a consultant $50,000 and have a 86-page document for a recovery plan, but just how are you going to focus on this? Maybe a theme a month, whatever that might be, to really ask staff what they need and really try to support that recovery. There may be things you say, sorry, we can't do that, but I think to engage them in this process is key as well. So as you go through the strategic planning, trying to, I would say, delay major changes if possible, because just from a quality perspective, implementation science, if everybody's burned out, big changes are going to be a really difficult thing to do anyway. So if you can like delay those while you fill that time with a focus on recovery, you're probably going to be much more successful later on with bigger changes, strategic initiatives that you implement through the plan.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
I have a sort of quick up or a follow-up to that one. I heard the when you just can't, and there's going to be a lot of times where we have projects and we have deadlines,
Yep.
and we want to give those folks the 2 weeks that they deserve. But when we just can't, do you have any recommendations on how you sort of balance out time off, but needing to stay into the work that we do on a
Yeah,
tight
so
deadline?
let me give you two answers to that. One, I think you'll like me. The other one, I want to push people a little bit again. Hopefully you still like me, but maybe just a little bit less. One is take the 12 months calendar out to schedule that vacation time. If you want to everybody take two-week vacations in the next 6 months, you're not going to be able to keep a clinic open. So really take the next 12 months, strategically try to have conversations to get people time off on the calendar now, take that long span. The other thing, if you've got big projects where you can't be open with that, I do want to challenge folks on this then. This is where I'm going to push just a little bit, not hearing this exactly from you, but this is a conversation I've been having a lot with people is I hear a lot of times, there's no way I could take 2 weeks off ever. Pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, there's like no way I can do that with my job. We have to start to look at that as an ethical problem. If you can't step away from your job for 2 weeks without checking emails, without calling in, now if the place burns down, you might want to know. There could be exceptions. But if you can't take time off, there's something wrong with how you've structured your jobs, right? And if staff can't take it off, and I'm talking about over a 12-month period here, we got to look at that as an ethical issue. You should be able to take vacation. If we give them time off, they should be able to take that without feeling guilty. If you have time off, you should be able to take that without the place shutting down. So I hope to combine those two things. And the second answer to that question is a harder one, because I think we have worked in realms of scarcity in this arena. And this is where maybe the avocation and the CCALAC can hopefully help us have that collective voice to say, hey, we need to rethink how we do this.
Can I just add something?
Please.
Hi, this is Deb.
Hey, Deb.
I think one of the things we have found we never really had this issue before the pandemic, but because people look at time off as going someplace, and that hasn't happened during the pandemic, they're not getting on planes, they're not going away. So they don't feel that it's the same thing. They're not going on vacation. So I think we have to have that conversation with our people about what, I hate that word, but what a staycation looks like, and what time off means. And it's not necessarily going somewhere. So how do we have that conversation? And I know my HR director is on this call. We actually sat down a week ago and looked at everyone's time off and how much they had accumulated. And we're now sitting down with our team and saying, let's schedule some time, even if it's just 2 or 3 days a week, a month, because if you have 30 days off a year, that's a lot of time. And so how do we do that? So I know Bianca and I are sitting down and doing that with our team.
Yeah. And I mean, things that pop into my head because I want to take a vacation in LA County right now is like, could you get discounted? I bet Disney probably would give healthcare workers, if you found the right person to talk to, maybe, even free tickets to Disneyland or Legoland, or there's a farm of some time out. You do live in an area where a lot of people, I would love to just sit on the beach and hit the ocean. So absolutely. And again, sit down, and if you can give them some things to have fun, take their family to Disneyland. Again, the number one thing of engagement, does my leader care about me as a person? And what a way to do that. I know we're running out of time here, and I'll give a few minutes at the end. I got to get a thank you in here before I say goodbye to y'all. Thank you for your resiliency. Thank you for keep showing up for your community. There are how many hundreds, if not thousands, of people are alive today because you found ways to keep providing healthcare through the most difficult, challenging times I think that any of us have been through. So this is where I got to give you a message of think about yourself. It's not selfish to ask, how do I take a month off in the next 12 months? It's not selfish. You're going to have to find a way while supporting everybody else to get healthy yourself as well. So I just want to thank you for your resiliency. Like I said, we can't measure how many people you've kept alive during this pandemic. And I just want to celebrate the hell out of you and thank the CCALAC for having me back. It's always a true honor to be here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. And we will make those slides available to you all with Matt's contact information if you'd like to connect. Just two more items really quick. I know we're wrapping up in the last 2 minutes. One, can we all just turn our cameras on really quickly so we can do a group photo? We're going to highlight the crew program in one of our newsletters. So we'd love to have your faces on there. And also we're just going to do a really fast giveaway for all the folks that attended. So just wait. If you're not able to turn your camera on, that's fine. Don't worry about it. We understand. All right, perfect. All right.
Perfect.
All right.
Alrighty. Ready, set, cheese. Okay, I got it. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you so much, Crystal. And then I'm going to hand it over to Aisha to do the giveaway really quickly before folks head out.
Everyone, I hope you had a wonderful training. Here is our wheel. Go to spin it now.
Oh, congrats, Daphne.
Thank you.
All right. So we'll be in contact with you about that. And we hope to see you all at our closing session next week.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good one.
Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you.